Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the Automation and Integration to Optimize Zero Trust Investments webinar. I'm John Kern, Managing Editor at Meritalk, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Elastic and Kind for supporting today's panel and for being part of the discussion. As we all know, cyber threats continue to evolve and increase in both complexity and frequency. Federal agencies are under growing pressure to modernize their security posture while working with finite resources. And that's why automation and integration are no longer nice to have, they're essential. Today, we'll explore how security information and event management, or SIEM, and security orchestration, automation, and response, or SOAR, can help agencies meet these demands while aligning with CISA's zero trust guidance, especially the just-in-time and just enough access principle. With that, let's go ahead and get started. We have three great panelists joining us today who bring us a wide range of experience from the public and private sector on cybersecurity and cyber operations. Joining us is our first panelist, John Harmon. He's Regional VP of Cyber Solutions at Elastic, where he leads cybersecurity efforts across the U.S. public sector. He brings over 20 years of experience in the intelligence community and also teaches cybersecurity strategy at Georgetown. Welcome, John.
Hello.
Next up is Navid Latska, Principal Solutions Engineer for Federal at Kind. He brings over 16 years of cybersecurity experience across both public and commercial sectors, with a background that includes roles from security engineer to deputy CISO. Welcome, Navid.
Hello.
And finally, we're joined by Manny Medrano, Director of the Office of Cyber Monitoring and Operations at the U.S. State Department. With over 20 years in cybersecurity, Manny leads the defense of the State Department's global networks, applying advanced analytics and automation to protect national security and support mobile diplomacy. Welcome, Manny.
Hello, thank you.
First off, I'd like to ask you all to briefly introduce yourselves to our viewers. Tell the audience just a little bit more about your background. Manny, why don't you go first?
Absolutely. So great to be here. So Manny Medrano, I'm the Director for Cyber Monitoring and Operations at the U.S. Department of State. So I work in the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. This is our law enforcement side of the U.S. Department of State, and our mission includes in DS for diplomatic security is to protect our people, our facilities, and our information. So my responsibility includes our SOC operations, Security Operations Center, that's Cyber Monitoring and Incident Response, our penetration testers, red team exercises, exposure management, and vulnerability scanning. I've been in this role for 5 years. Prior to that, I was working on cyber threat intelligence. And then way before that, I was working on some policy-related work at the State Department. So I've been with State for 15 years. And then I have experience working for city, state, and local governments. And then I was also posted overseas working for an NGO in Afghanistan, working on some agriculture-related work. So great to be here.
Thanks, Manny. Navid, how about you?
Yeah, good to be here. Nice to meet everybody. I'm Navid Wolatzka. I'm currently the Principal Solutions Engineer here at Tynes. Some information about my background. I started as a system administrator and transitioned into the security space about 12 to 14 years ago, where I was a federal employee at HHS. We built a SOC at a HHS agency from the ground up, built a Splunk Center of Excellence there, and also brought automation into that. I then transitioned, and that's where I had my deputy CISO role towards the end of my tenure there. I transitioned to Splunk, where I was a SOAR architect, primarily focusing on getting commercial and government customers to adopt SOAR, specifically Phantom, and working and building incident response plans, as well as workflows for a lot of our customers. I transitioned to Guy Point Security, which is a value add reseller as well as a consulting company where I use the same types of SOAR skills to implement other SOAR technologies within the federal space as well as the commercial space. And now I'm at Times doing some of the same work, but leveraging our powerful critical workflow platform to implement SOAR technologies and get user adoption. So thank you very much, John.
Thanks, Navid. John, how about you?
Yeah, hello everybody. So my name is John Harmon. I currently lead all of our public sector cybersecurity work for Elastic. That means I work with our DoD team, our intelligence community team, federal civilian, and SLED, state level education teams, and all of our customers. I'm kind of the gateway between working with our hands-on with our customers and working with our product team, and understanding kind of where our product's going, where our kind of roadmap, kind of being also that. I like to say my job is to kind of be the text buddies with the CISO of every customer, so that that we're successful and they're successful in their missions. About my kind of background, I just say I understand adversary really well because I used to be one. I spent most of my career as an intelligence officer, gaining access to our adversaries' networks, and then I transitioned to I owned a defense contracting business that I built and sold, and then came to a company called Endgame, which is an endpoint security company that was very popular within the DoD and like federal civilian agencies. Then we got acquired by Elastic, and I've been at Elastic ever since we got acquired back in 2019. So I've been there for that. So happy to be here and looking forward to this discussion.
Great. Well, thank you all again for joining us today. To kick off our discussion, let's talk about the big picture. Agencies are facing increasing cyber threats, but they often have limited personnel to respond. That makes smart use of tools more important than ever. So, starting with a question for the group, how are federal agencies balancing the need for comprehensive security monitoring with the realities of that limited personnel and increasing cyber threats? Manny, how about we start with you?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think this question kind of like we're all dealing with something similar right now, right? But first, let's go ahead and address this a little bit different, right? I think that we're all going through some level of automation, right? And whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector, right? And it's nothing new. I think we've been doing this for a while, right? One thing that I would like to say, right, in terms of what I'm working on is often we refer to doing more with less, right? To me, that's old school, right? Absolutely, you do more with less, but I think I want to take it a little bit further than that, which is more about working smart, thinking strategically, and then focusing on the things that matter the most to the mission, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cite a few examples on that, just in terms of what we're doing, right? So right now, we are integrating or working on the integration of artificial intelligence, right, into our cyber analytics. So we gather massive amounts of data from automated monitoring tools, as well as through our system and network logs, right? There's just a lot of data that we gather, right? And that's a good thing, right? We have tons of data, but what we're working on is making sure that we are gathering the data that is most valuable to the operations that we have. Because, right, you can if you had all the money in the world and all the resources in the world, well, you can definitely just house all of that data, right? But right now, what we need to do is have, with limited number of personnel and resources, only gather the data that we need and then be able to sort that automatically instead of manually. Well, and with AI, right, it gives us that ability to make sense of this data. But I want to step further a little bit, right, because there is different, I think AI gets misconstructed, right, in terms of machine learning versus AI and versus generative AI, right? Very different things. And all three provide capabilities that can definitely help an organization to bring some efficiencies, right? What we're doing is by gathering all of this threat data right into the mix, then we are able to prioritize based on the enterprise, on what we know about the enterprise, geopolitical events, which definitely have an influence here for the State Department, right? And then we allow the SOC analysts to be able to then work on the first worst issue, right? The first one that will have a greater impact to the organization, right? Now, one thing that I would say is that we have started this journey about a year ago, it's not an easy journey because it's a culture shift, and we are continuing to mature as we go, right? We haven't had that, what I call a silver bullet where everything is working now. But we are noticing now where the technology is helping us for the analysts to be able to make decisions faster and focus on the most impactful threats that are out there. Then what we're doing, another thing that we're also doing is getting out of the infrastructure business. I think the team, when I first came in here, we love our servers, we hug our servers, but I don't want to be in the infrastructure business, right? Because we can leverage other services or other infrastructure as a service, right? That can definitely get that away from the mission so that we can focus on what's most important. And we are migrating our on-premise to the cloud as much as we can. Cloud smart, not cloud first, because there are things that we definitely cannot migrate to the cloud with a data architecture where cost is important, meaning that is bringing the analytics closest to where the data is to avoid moving the data across, because that's a huge cost. What we have seen so far, right, is with this is that we are now freeing up a lot of the resources, right, that were focused on just the constant care of that legacy infrastructure, and we're refocusing and retraining them to work on more of the cyber defense operations that we have.
Manny, thanks for that great insight. John, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Manny, I thought I was gonna be the one to win the first buzzword bingo of dropping the AI bomb, but it really, it's funny because as a community, I think as security people, we're generally very prickly, very like like AI. That's kind of a buzzword, right? And even when I kind of first started, we started integrating AI into our platforms. Maybe about two Black Hat, two RSAs ago is kind of when everybody started really talking about this stuff. I was very skeptical, but the once we've kind of gotten past some of these, yet another chatbot that's kind of been everybody's product, which of course is kind of table stakes now. But really, it's really these things. I know that we've added some, and Times has added some. It's these quality of life improvements that AI really can bring to the table. Where I was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is really where we're going to see this huge title change. It's not just about how can we all copy ChatGPT in our products, which everybody has, and they're great ads, but really it's about how can we leverage this technology to have a quality of life improvement. How can it take the young analyst, whether it be in an agency, state government, or a young military officer or young military member, how can I up level them, right? They come in, they're coming in a swing shift or something in the SOC. They're already behind. There are 1,000 alerts they got to look at. The team wasn't able to look at in the morning. How do they handle that, right? And the thing I've been blown away by is how good some of these LLMs, specifically on the on the generative AI side, how good they are at correlation, right? And that's one of the biggest problems we had, especially post COVID. We had this explosion of data where everybody went home, and we still have just tons of data that's being created, and no one was let go of it, and we have between 2131 on the civilian side and NSM-8 on the DoD classified side. Now we know we have to have this data. The government got kind of stopped in the face when it came to responding to the SolarWinds and Log4j and whatever else is coming up this holiday season. Whatever comes up now, and so we have to have those data, and that's where I've seen this huge impact. And honestly, totally anecdotally, I talked to CISOs and CIOs across the U.S. entire government. We've seen this huge push for cloud, but the adoption of AI has been, to me, unprecedented of how quickly I thought these agents. I didn't think we'd move this quickly in government. And we have every agency across the whole government trying to figure out what's their AI strategy going to be and how can they implement this. Because I think it really is because of how we can have these kind of really huge quality of life improvements to the teams.
Thanks, John. How about you, Navid?
I'll jump on the AI bandwagon here too, I guess. And then I might bring us down a little bit and just talk about how how automation can actually really help agencies just as a force multiplier, based on their limited resources and stuff. But yeah, on the AI front, I agree. The adoption within AI in the federal government has been unprecedented. I totally agree with what John has been saying on that, and even what Manny, how he kind of brokered that. I think really one of the benefits with Tines is we didn't just slap a chatbot onto our platform and call that an AI capability just for marketing purposes. I think when I spoke to our development or engineering team a little while back, I think we had like something like 200 iterations of the product that we went through before we came to a feature where like, okay, this is not just an AI chatbot. This is kind of what John mentioned. We can use some of our AI features like Workbench to really up level the analyst, users, engineers that are actually using the platform, and really use AI both to up level how you're building automation workflows within the platform, how you're integrating with them, but also how you're using the data coming back from those API calls to get the additional insights and be able to pivot, right? Do ad hoc pivots that fall outside of a standard workflow, and be able to use our product like Workbench and do ad hoc API calls and use the power of AI to build reports, update cases with that report, and do a lot of that manual work and tedious work that analysts had to do themselves that were quite time consuming. But with that said, right, I really think there's three different types of or three different key points that how automation is really helping agencies with their comprehensive security monitoring. And really the first is leveraging automation as a force multiplier, right? Federal agencies are using security platforms and automation platforms like Tines to really allow limited personnel to accomplish more with less, right? And we do that without having them write a single line of code. And if you've got Python developers, that's no problem, right? You can bring in or import your Python scripts in the platform and have those run. One last point here that I feel like is really overlooked, especially when it comes to security teams, is they're not just responding to threats, right? And this is me putting my practitioner hat on from my experience. Your incident response duties are half of the job, right? You're also responding to ad hoc requests from everybody else within the organization, from HR to your ISSOs to your system owners, right? Everybody, security has now been baked into almost every process within an agency. So you're dealing with those types of requests as well. And what really brought me to Tines after knowing what the whole SOAR industry and what the products look like is one real feature that I think is really powerful, and that's our pages feature, allowing SOCs and other organizations within an agency to stand up a self-service portal and really automate requests that they would have to respond to an email, ServiceNow tickets, Jira tickets, or whatever their ticketing platform is. Now they can direct users to a particular link, have a guided workflow for those users to go through and get the information that they need to quickly move on to the next task. So I really feel like that's a really important point to hit on, because being a practitioner, I know that responding to threats is not your only job, and a lot of the other ad hoc tasks take up a lot more time than your responding threats job.
No, but thanks for that. Let's zero in a bit on zero trust. As everyone knows, it's not just a buzzword, it's an actual mandate. And automation is a critical enabler, especially when it comes to access control and real-time decision making. So the question is, what role does automation play in advancing zero trust initiatives, particularly in line with CIS's just-in-time, just enough access guidance? Navid, let's head back to you.
Sure, I'll take this one again. So, I think automation is truly the enabler of zero trust. I don't think you could have a sound zero trust architecture without some kind of automation components in it. And I think both the CISA model of zero trust and the DoD model of zero trust have made that clear, right? I think it's pillar 6, and it even blends into pillar 7 of the DoD model, where you have automation as almost the centerpiece of your zero trust architecture. And that's the same with the CISA model with the cross-cutting pillar at the bottom, right, for automation and orchestration. So really simply put, I think without automation, the CISA's just in time and just enough access methodology becomes administratively impossible. So you need some form of automation. And preferably, it's a centralized form of automation where you don't have ad hoc calls or ad hoc connections between, I don't know, for example, your EDR solution and your IDP or ICAM solution, right? Because then you have engineers managing all of these one-off ad hoc calls between these tools when you could pretty much almost centralize automation where applicable, right? I know there's some outliers and network segmentation and other things that occur, but the idea here is to centralize your automation into like a policy decision point or something like that, where you're managing the workflows out of basically one solution or maybe a federated solution. And I think with that, another point is continuous verification, right? That's another major aspect of zero trust is you're continually verifying user access within the environment. So when a user is requesting access to a certain folder or a certain page or a certain piece of data within a database, right? You need to have automation be able to verify the risk elements of that access. Where is that user requesting access from? What are the attributes of that user, right? Are they supposed to be accessing that data at midnight, right? Are they even supposed to be working or are they on PTO, right? So I think it's taking all of these data elements that are within all of these different tools within the environment, be a security tool, an HR tool, or even mission enabling tools within agencies, and having a product like Tines or an automation solution that can easily integrate within all of these tools, not reliant on bloated Python scripts that build these apps or bloated JavaScripts, but being able to quickly pivot and integrate with a tool and including that in your zero trust architecture.
Thank you, Navid. Manny, what are you thinking?
So everything that he just said, no, no, and more. No, I totally agree. So I just want to make sure right out, just to kind of say it. So I'm not leading the zero trust implementation for the State Department. Our CISO is doing that, and that's in the Bureau of Diplomatic Technology. That doesn't mean that I'm not working on zero trust, right? So I do work with her and I enable some of her operations as well. So we support them. With that said, right, automation, definitely, I mean, I could not agree more with that it's a major factor for advancing zero trust. And I am in agreement that I think zero trust, I get what it means, the purpose of it, but I think it's a buzzword that we continue to use, but we need more traction and more action. Just get it done, right? But one example that that I can speak to is identity management, right? So the identity management from my perspective, right, it needs to evolve more to a true zero trust model, right? It's no longer about just getting authorized onto a network and then going to town, right? That ain't working anymore, right? So what identity needs to do is must support a way to authenticate right at the application layer, which is important, right? Is to get to the application layer, the data layer, and then provide access to only the functions and the data that are appropriate to the user. That is crucial, especially for segmentation, right? And to avoid lateral movement coming from a cyber defense perspective, right? Then that also will include whether the user is coming from, and then the type of user and the type of device that is being used to access that. And a lot of this can be automated, right? So the point where all you're doing is just be reviewing the report or any like red flags that may come up, right? That's where I think one simple way where automation can go a long ways. And then I do agree with my colleague as well. There's many other options where zero trust and automation can go together to accelerate, right, our journey towards that end state.
Thank you, Manny. John?
Yeah, just one quick comment that industry, honestly, I think industry has done a huge disservice to zero trust. It's even today, we're a couple of years into zero trust where it's still kind of marketed as this like, it's here, let me sell you something, right? Let me sell you this as zero trust as a box. And it's not, it's a strategy, right? Like whenever I try to have kind of real talk with customers, we talk about zero trust it's really about, it's understanding your data, understanding the assets you have deployed to your enterprise, and collect as much as possible, and then have a automation tool and a data platform that enables this, right? And most customers, they can see it as this huge behemoth thing I spent a ton of money on. Lots of times you can get, that 50, 60, 70% solution with what you have today, as long as you have some kind of a SIEM or some place that you're putting data into, some place that you can action data, and ways of talking to it. Now, of course, obviously I'm biased, but the best solutions in the world is a elastic time kind of combination. But really, as long as you have the ability to have, I say, like, it's about having the brain of zero trust. Where does data go to? Where am I able to see threats, see telemetry, see log data coming into the brain, and then having the arms and legs able to action that data as to where it needs to go, who I need to interact with, right? That's really what it comes down to. Do I have a centralized place that enables me to action my data, my telemetry, and act upon it in a timely fashion? And the biggest thing, and I don't care what all is going on, we're always in a money crunch at some point. It has to be something that's affordable, right? And then you layer in your zero trust with the requirements of 2131 and NSM 8, where we had these long-term 12-month, 18-month data requirements. That's how they kind of work well together, right? But it's about, how do we do this in a technically compliant way that gives us advantages, but how do we do it cost effective also.
Thank you all. Manny, the State Department operates on a massive global scale. With diplomatic missions worldwide, cybersecurity has to be both agile and consistent. How has the Department of State leveraged automation and analytics to enhance incident detection and response capabilities across those global operations?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about what we're doing right with AI, right? I mean, and automation in many other capacities. But the next one where I can add more to this, right, given our global footprint, right, and how we have security folks, both domestic and overseas at our embassies or consulates, right? So I want to key it on visualization. And that goes a little bit more than just the word visualization, right? Because what we have noticed and what we're working on right now as part of our key security architecture moving forward for the SOC, right, is building personas. And what I mean by personas is like, who is who and what persona are they and what action are they going to take, right, in our cyber defense mission. Because often, right, we look at, oh, let's automate, let's do some analytics, and let's do a dashboard, and then I often ask the question, what's the purpose of the dashboard? And they're like, well, it looks pretty. No, that's not the whole purpose here. It's like, how is that making a change? So what we're doing right now is working across the entire enterprise with our CIO, with our CISO, and our security staff overseas to make sure that we capture like the key personas, right, that will help us against this fight. Then it's like, okay, what is the data that needs to be visualized, right? Or information, there will be information for these personas to take action. That's the keyword, tangible action, right? Because otherwise, then it's just a pretty dashboard that we cannot just look at it and then do nothing with it. So that's one of the key things, right? Is like, what is the business requirement for that? The second thing that we're doing then is we have interviewed many of these personas to include, in this case, like managers, right? You got senior leadership, you got SOC analysts. It's like, what does the SOC analyst need versus a system owner versus a security person overseas as well, so that they can take action, and what analytical information do they need, right? So that way we're making the right decision for the organization, right? The key also is for that is so that we are acting without having an impact on the operations as well, because we have had those lessons learned as well. So in a global area, right, that's where for me, automation, like we said earlier, right, can help us big time in terms of coordinating this faster across the different bureaus, the different security sections, different embassies and consulates, all back here to the mothership in domestic.
Thanks, Manny. John, zero trust relies on both instant awareness and long-term insights. How does Elastic SIEM solution provide both real-time visibility and historical context to support zero trust verification and auditing?
Yeah, so kind of old school SIM was brought into be that single silo of data where like, hey, we have all this log data everywhere. How do I bring it to one spot and be able to visualize that, right? That's kind of like SIM 1.0, SIM 2.0 kind of brought in the idea of how can we sprinkle in some ML and some it's kind of where they added some SOAR kind of in there. And then really what I kind of say this what I love to kind of call this kind of SIM 3.0 kind of area was it's about because really it's about the two things of not only do we need that real-time visibility, so we have real-time alerting, or we bring in EDR, or we bring in firewall logs, whatever it is, and be able to alert and correlate on that. But also, too, how do we do it on longer periods of time, or how to store that data long periods of time? One thing we learned, with the SolarWinds attack was nobody had the data, right? No one, and when SolarWinds was, the attack where the adversary was, literally vacationing in our networks, where they were there 12 plus months in some cases, right? That is just, and not many people had that much data. So when, when we have another kind of attacker that's, and then we saw a little bit here with some of the telcos, fairly recently, where they're, literally just kind of living the networks. We need to have the ability to have long-term data storage, but still have it actionable. Like if we, no, that's one of the biggest things about kind of foot stomp with 2131, and it always applies to zero trust too, because it's about having the data, is the data is no good if I can't somehow query it, analyze it, action it in some way, right? If it's sitting in a hard drive or in some cold storage where I can't access it, I can't search it, I can't make it a part of my research, it's worthless. Might as well not even have it. Why even have it, right? That's the thing we learned with like the SolarWinds was, not having that telemetry for long periods of time was just super detrimental because we couldn't access it, right? And so I can't answer simple questions. So when the CISO, comes to Manny and says, hey, we see this, the FBI said we saw some kind of foreign adversary activity. Have you seen this TTP? And if we can't answer that question in, hopefully minutes, if not at least a day, that it is a huge problem. And we spent way too much money, way too much time answering simple questions for SolarWinds, Log4j, and even now, with this Salt Typhoon stuff, we're spending too much time, right, doing it. So it's really about not only can we have the real-time analytics and alerting of, hey, we saw a bad guy, cross the wire right now. Okay, action that, right? Really about how can we also in the historical context, meeting a 12-month hot and 18-month cold, be able to action, essentially 12, 24, 48 months of data in a timely fashion, right? And it can't be, one I spent, I got to spend $500,000 on contractors to go, root around in our data and rehydrate it and bring it in and figure out how that works. It's got to be, and it can't also be run a query on a Friday night, pray to God I don't knock over my, my cluster over the weekend, and maybe get a result on Monday. It's got to be run my query, at the very least, run my query, go refresh my water, go get another cup of coffee, and get my result back, right? And I can have it from potentially years of data. That's the way it's got to be, right? Now, again, I have to keep coming back to it. It's got to be affordable, right? Like in an infinite world, of course, we can make, I can make a cluster that's running on the entire AWS, a cloud, and make it hold as much data as possible, and it costs $1 bazillion every year. That's not realistic, right? So it's really, how do we provide, a platform that we can collect as much data as possible, and hopefully almost everything, store most of that data for a good period of time, and have it in an actionable format that not only gives us real-time telemetry, but gives us the ability to do a look back, be able to do, kind of threat hunting on data when we identify new TTPs, and be able to answer that question, when we see a large-scale attack happening, be able to answer that question of, have you seen this TTP? And, or the government being able to say, yes, we saw it, we're going to clean it up. No, we didn't see it. We're good to go.
Thanks, John. Ton of insight in there. Navid, in high stakes environments, speed and precision matter. How does Tynes help federal agencies automate complex incident response workflows, especially when integrating across diverse tools and systems?
You hit on one of my favorite topics, automation and incident response, and integrating across diverse tools and systems. So I think one of the barriers for traditional SOAR products or just automation products, let's call them that, has been being able to integrate with a wide swath of technologies, right? Not just security technologies, right? SOAR was born out of security, so a lot of the, I guess you can call more legacy SOAR technologies have good, robust integrations with security technologies. But as soon as you start getting out of the security realm and focusing to IT and basically other technologies that have APIs that you want to automate against, that's where you start running into barriers. And I think that's one of the most important concepts when it comes to automation is having the capability to integrate with anything that has an API, literally anything on the network that has an API without having to go through development cycles, coding cycles, and things like that. So this is really where Tine's no-code integration capabilities really help us integrate with diverse systems, right? And really, we help federal agencies connect their disparate tool sets, right, without custom coding and bridging the gap between legacy systems and modern security tools using our flexible API capabilities and connections. This really helps eliminate any kind of integration barriers that typically slow adoption of SOAR products within the environment. And I think historically looking back, the adoption of SOAR has been slow within the federal agency because one, in the past for traditional SOAR products, it's taken a particular set of skills to actually deploy effective workflows within the environment. And a lot of those are around development skills and things like that. We're trying here at times to turn that on its head, right? You can develop in the platform if you want to, but I think the majority of our customers like our capabilities because we can quickly build integrations on the fly. And by quickly, I mean like within a minute, right? Taking a curl command from an API doc, copying it and pasting it directly into our workflow builder, and bam, you've got an integration stood up and you've got all the aspects of that curl command already pre-built within that template you just built. So that's number one. And I think that's the most critical when any agency is evaluating a SOAR product. You've got to look at the integrations first. Without integrations, you don't have a SOAR product, right? It's shelfware. Another point here is you can automate something from end to end. And a lot of more mature organizations might be doing that, but it's also important to keep the human in the loop and having controls and making it really easy to keep them in the loop, right? Not by just sending them an email and telling them to respond to an email. Users get tons of emails every single day, right? And no, not one person is going to be up at 1 or 2 a.m. looking at their emails trying to respond to a SOAR event, right? So what I really like what we're doing with Times is turning that aspect on its head. And one of the features that I really like is called pages, right? With pages, you can easily spin up an HTML page within a workflow and even build self-service portals like I alluded to in one of my earlier questions, right? And really get users in that automation loop quicker and faster and be able to have them make decisions and respond to events a lot quicker. And one last point here is our SOAR can be automating 100 different actions or 1,000 different actions a day. But if you're not measuring the impact of those actions and what operational improvements are going to come out of that, you're not doing automation the right way. The point of automation is to give you standardized outputs, right? And measure and have you measure how those automations are impacting the daily operations that you're going through and how they're impacting the agency as a whole. Right. And with that, we love reporting, right? So I think it's important to use workflows to reduce incident response times from days to minutes, but also to provide consistent audible response actions, regardless of the analyst experience and regardless of your staffing limitations. And this really helps agencies enable or handle their increasing threat volume without their proportional staff increases, because they can see the power of automation, and any team that owns that platform can go take those metrics that we're collecting, this time savings metrics, their mean time to detect, the mean time to resolution metrics, and show that to other teams and departments to get further adoption of automation within the agency.
Thank you, Navid. Folks, I think we're at the last question of our session today. When SIEM and SOAR tools are integrated well, the payoff is big: faster response, clearer insights, and stronger posture. Let's explore that impact a little bit. Can you share examples of how integrating SIEM and SOAR tools has transformed the speed and effectiveness of threat detection and response in federal environments? Tom, how about we start with you?
Yeah, so the when it comes to like integrating SIEM and SOAR, right? They're kind of like, peanut butter and jelly on a sandwich, right? So it's really kind of one of the great combinations there of there are two things that are kind of hand in hand. Of you have to have the data, like I said before, of this. They have this generational moments of SIEM, and in the SIEM 2.0 kind of where SIEM SOAR got added in to it. There's lots of acquisitions kind of happening in the area, and teamings that happened. It really is a combination of adding in SOAR with having this kind of understanding. We have this kind of concept of a data mesh where we want to have your data kind of like everywhere, especially in a large concept of not just putting siloing your data in one place. When you combine having your data actionable, where you're holding for long periods of time, like you mentioned before, and the ability to kind of not have multiple copies of it kind of sitting everywhere, SOAR can be used, like I said, as the arms are bringing it all together, right? So no matter if you don't have an integration or not, we have, I think almost 1,000 integrations out of the box. But there's always something else you want to do. There's always something custom, especially in the government. That'd be a GOTS tool, or sometimes it's some older piece of software that it's still kind of that's still kind of there, that maybe just has a webhook or something that you want to integrate into. But having the flexibility of having your one place for all your data, and then an automation platform that gives you the ability to have infinite integrations, infinite amount of things kind of putting together. That's really where you see the power of SIEM and SOAR together. And then where you're really, one of my biggest things I like to focus on is how do we level up our analysts, right? So nobody has, I'll call them our ninjas, or nobody has a team of ninjas, which is your super high speed kind of team. There's always that one or two guys or gals on the team that are like, throw a Python script at them and like, hey, just give me a terminal and give me some APIs and I'll whip up something and I got something crazy, right? That's not everybody on the team, right? That's not the DNA of every single team. There's always kind of high flyers are there, but really it's about how do I level up our junior level analysts and operators, right? So I don't care if you're, Walmart, or you're, small, agency, or even, a large, your NSA or CIA or some part DoD is huge amount of teams. There still isn't this bulk of, the experts in every single team. There are people that are extremely committed to the mission, right? But really it's about how do we have a team that can, figure out what we're going to do. That's one of the things I love about Batines too, is it's kind of this next generation of how we do automation, of expecting people to just be able to code in the Python or some kind of a coding language. That's where you see this adoption of these kind of WYSIWYG, kind of drag and drop boxes around, and draw lines, lines with each other, be able to do that kind of stuff. It's we're seeing everywhere, right? And you're seeing it even in the kind of the LLMs, where it's just using natural language. So it's like when we can use these natural attributes that pretty much anybody on a team, I don't care if you're just a kid right out of college or some military member right out of boot camp, they can use these tools, right? They know how to drag and drop things. They can be effective. And I have a military / intelligence community background, so I'll talk about how we can fight the network better. And so it's really about how can we help our analyst operators fight the network better, so that we give them the tools, right? It's really about giving them the tools so they can defend and and automate, and so they can do it themselves. They don't necessarily need to have they can kind of create integrations together and make their team more effective at fighting the network.
Thanks, John. How about you, Manny?
Yeah, so I'll give a quick example. I mean, I agree with what Navid and John have said so far, right? And I could not agree more with Navid as well on where low code, no code tools, right? That you can just be able to just integrate them, right? Because I think that having been with government for close to 20 years, that is something that we have done is we think we're a special snowflake. So therefore we build custom snowflakes that then get us into trouble later on. We within the SOC, so we do have a SOAR, we do have a SIEM, and we are also implementing a mesh architecture. Just everything we just talked about, right? And we have used the SOAR right now to automate a lot of those workflows and also playbooks that we have created for incident response. We're not completely there yet, but we have automated a lot of that so that way we have our SIM data, right, integrated with our SOAR, so that, and then we also have it with our threat integration tools as well. So it's all together, right? Eventually, what I would like to do, right, is to get to the point where you got some of that like basic incident response playbooks, right, where will not have an impact to the organization, that can be fully automated, right? But right now with SOAR, we have gained so many efficiencies. And going back to what Navid said, right, then we're tracking also how those automations are making us better, because that's extremely important, because sometimes it's not just automate to automate, but also how are we improving, right? What's the outcome of that? Mm-hmm.
Great points, Manny. Navid, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll quickly answer this. I think the SIEM and SOAR story has been a traditional story since SOAR kind of really came out. But what I really like about at least our partnership with Elastic from a SIEM and SOAR type partnership is, Elastic alerting. We can easily ingest that, run the tried and true enrichment playbooks against that I think almost any agency or organization starts with SOAR. But I think the reason we start with that is because it's the most impactful, right? And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, right? I think you're always going to need to have that relationship there, and you're always going to need to have an enrichment playbook that after an Elastic alert triggers, you pull that into your product, you look at the IOCs, you threat hunt the IOCs right within your environment, you do your outside investigations from the IPs or URLs or indicators and things like that. But another use case that I think is also really important, and again, it's a tried and true, and I think many organizations or vendors have failed to do this the right way, is phishing response, right? Phishing response is an age-old problem that every agency still continues to deal with, that still leads to one of the biggest breaches, right? And it's because it's a human problem and not necessarily a technology problem. But what I like how we've handled phishing response and workflows here at Times is we've built out of the box, I can't even count them, a ton of pre-built phishing response playbooks that any user or agency can easily adopt, right? And this is as simple as just importing it into your environment, plugging in the credentials with the tools that we have those pre-built around, and at least implementing and having a starting point. And then you can customize those playbooks from there and really make them something greater than what we've already built, right? But I think really anybody who's still doing phishing manually, like that's where you're spending the majority of your time. So let's talk about automation and do a 90% reduction in your time to do that. And again, that's where the human element that I talked to in my previous questions comes into play, because you can automate phishing to some degree. You always need to have that confirmation or a user looking at that. And usually they should be coming in at the latter part of your automation workflow, right? All of the data that they need should be available to them once they're looking at that data, and they just need to decide, is this malicious, is this benign, or is this a legitimate email, and then fire off to the next alert and workflow. I think two other cases that I want to really hit on really quickly is asset enrichment, especially in larger environments where you've got tens of thousands of assets on the network and all in different networks, is an alert triggers and knowing what that asset is right off the bat. You either do that correlation in Elastic, right, with asset tables and things like that, or you can do that in your SOAR product if you've got asset information on various different like CMDBs or your various like asset monitoring tools, vulnerability scanners, and things like that. Because I think one of the most important things that drives incident priority is knowing what that asset is and how critical that asset is to the agency and the risks associated with that asset being compromised, right? And this is really where automation can really, really help, right? You can run automated elastic queries. You can run queries against your Exoniuses, against your other like tenable vulnerability scanning tools, right? Against all of these types of tools that are collecting all this asset metadata and being able to pull that information in and make the right decision. And my last point here, looping AI back into it all, is AI can really help you do that a lot quicker and faster if you have those connections and data sets available within your environment. Thank you, John.
Before we wrap up, do any of you have any final closing thoughts to add? John, how about you?
Yeah, Bob. So the like I said, we kind of hit a lot of the kind of points here today of what for zero trust and automation is. It's it should be a crawl walk run. Understanding kind of what you have in place. Nobody, no customers. Of course, we all want you to buy buy some software, but in general, it's really about understanding kind of what you have in place. And then taking that and doing your inventory, understanding kind of where you meet the requirements from 2131, NSMA to zero trust, and what other EO is kind of coming down the pike here coming out. But the understanding what it is, implementing technology that helps you be more more efficient and effective at defending the network. And again, like I said, and doing how we can do this cost effectively, are just the biggest keys, and the way everybody's going right now. And I really thank everybody for the time.
John, thank you. Manny, a final thought for us?
No, first of all, thank you for the time, and I agree. I think that one key takeaway, right, is that there are several initiatives that I think we're all working on already, and it just bring them together, right, and then making sure that they're aligned to that long-term impact that we're trying to get to, right. And automation, right, is just go beyond just simple automation, but I think it's how do we bring more efficiencies into a lot of the operations that we do, right? It's nothing new, something that was coming. It's just that it's getting faster and more available than before.
Thanks, Manny. Navid, you're going to get the final thought.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me on here. It's been really enjoyable. I think just to wrap this up from an automation standpoint, for any team to really be successful, right, I think you need to focus on building a cohesive security ecosystem for automation and really trying to centralize that. And really, the way you get that going is you start with your critical workflows, you demonstrate immediate value there, and then you expand from there. And this is alluding back to John's kind of crawl, walk, run methodology that 100% applies to automation. You want to start with like one high visibility workflow that addresses your current pain point. You want to document the time savings and security improvements to build momentum within the agency for broader adoption. And then you're going to focus on your quick wins, demonstrate value, and build towards a more comprehensive and cohesive zero trust automation and architecture. Simply put, you need if you guys are evaluating SOAR solutions or automation solutions, you need to look at those integrations and how that workflows and how those capabilities jive with what your talent looks like within the agency and the solutions you have deployed. Thank you all.
Navid, thank you. On behalf of Meritalk, I'd like to extend a thank you to Elastic and Tynes for sponsoring today's program. I would also like to thank each of our panelists for their time today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day.